mobile.
All right. So, welcome everybody. I'm excited to host all of you here today. Welcome to Cryo. We have an amazing lineup of speaker today, right? So, I'm very excited to welcome the co-founder and CEO of a company that is very dear to all of you. I'm sure you've loved it. You've had frustrating moments on it. You've learned a lot from it. But at the end of the day, you're going to have a lasting relationship with this one company. That's HackerRank, developers' favorite. And with me today is Vivek Ravishankar. He's the co-founder and CEO of HackerRank. Vivek, welcome to Cryo's Winter of Doing and this big variable series that we are hosting today.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ajay, for the introduction, for the invite. We try our best to
Right.
reduce the frustrating moments that developers have.
All right. So hey, I can't quite hear you, Ratana. Is it audible? Can you hear Vivek?
Yeah.
Yeah, my mic seems to be working.
Just a second. I think it's my audio. No, I think I can hear. Um,
Can you hear me, Ajay, now?
yeah, I can hear you. Is Vivek audible?
Yeah, can you
Yes.
hear?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now. Perfect. All right. Yeah. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
No,
Yeah.
no, no worries. No, thank you for the invite. Thank you for the introduction. We try to reduce the frustrating moments to people as much as possible, but I can definitely see that happening. So super excited to be here. Yeah, let's kick it off.
Okay, so I'll introduce the audience. So Cryo, we're a learning platform. We believe in project-based learning and focusing on sort of honing the core development skills of developers. Today in the audience, we have a large user base. Our audience, our users, our customers, as well as our graduates, right? We're also conducting a massive open event today. It's called an externship, where we've actually lined up about 5 or 6 startups who are actually giving out projects to candidates who want to just try it out and get their feet wet with development and sort of explore and push their potentials, in software development, right? So that whole audience, we have thousands of users also watching today and eagerly waiting to interact with you. So yeah, this is your opportunity to kind of say hello and welcome the audience.
Yeah, no, I think I got introduced to Cryo from Ratina, obviously, and it's actually really an interesting story. I got introduced because there was an intern in our company who used your product and who used our platform, and we have something similar on something called as a project-based hiring, which
Right.
is hey, there is like a real world challenges based hiring and things in those lines.
Mhm.
And there was this intern who actually pinged me and said, "Hey, by the way, have you heard of this company called Crio?" And I said no, and just by the look of the name, I thought you guys were from Europe or somewhere there. And then this person said, "No, no, no, they are based in Bangalore, and there are actually a
Right.
bunch of ex Flipkart guys who have actually started this company." That's when like I reached out to Ratina and a bunch of other folks to say like, "Hey, this seems really really cool. We should definitely talk about it." I think what you are doing is a very developer friendly ish approach to learning because I think there are a lot of different learning sites. Obviously, edtech is in a big boom right now. Any company that has the name edtech gets a $20 million check these days from VCs. So edtech isn't like a huge boom, but everyone seems to be doing some rehashed version of one another, which is like, hey, I have a better course. Here's a better instructor. Like, here is a different way for me to go ahead and teach with like a video based learning. But I think like what you folks are doing is like I mentioned, is a very developer friendly approach, because developers like to build, developers like to get their hands dirty, and most of the things that people learned are not from like tutorials or books and things on those lines. It's basically people trying to explore a bunch of things and stumbling and like trying to figure out how to get out of that and continuing to learn. So no, you're definitely onto something huge, and that's pretty evident from the kind of audience and the developers who you're able to attract.
Well, thank you. It's very flattering description, something that probably we wouldn't have given ourselves. So thank you for that. So let's talk about you. Let's talk about your journey. Let's talk about HackerRank. And let's start with what was HackerRank before it was HackerRank. So do you want to talk a little bit about, actually, even before we go there, you want to talk about, where did you grow up? Where did you go to college? Your background.
Yeah, so I was born in Bangalore and grew up mostly in Bangalore and Chennai for most of my life. Schooling was all done in Chennai, and I did my college in Trichy, NIT Trichy.
Right.
Uh, and I did a bunch of things in college. I, 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 I did like coding contests, the whole notion of Top Coder, Google Code Jam, and things on those lines. And it used to be a bit of a pride as to how many T-shirts that you could actually collect by winning these contests.
Yeah.
That used to be the mark of how strong of a developer you are. And I also did a bunch of this business plan kind of contests. Mostly because it felt fun, and also the business plan contest is the biggest irony, right? The business plan contest actually paid more than like the coding contest for whatever reason. I would have expected it to be the inverse in terms of prize money and things.
Right.
I also got introduced to Linux for the first time, and it was really cool because there used to be a lab in our college called the Sun Lab, where there used to be a bunch of Sun Microsystems terminals,
Right.
and then there would be a few Linux terminals, and then the rest of the lab is actually all Windows based. So hardly anybody used to come to the Sun Lab, because when you turn on, all you see is a blank screen. Like, okay, so what do I do with this? And it's just a terminal prompt doing that. So it almost like naturally attracted a few people to that Sun Lab who were just curious, who wanted to learn, which is, by the way, like how I met my co-founder Hari. Like, we
Sure.
used to hang out together in Sun Lab and like do a bunch of different things. And I also did a bunch of movie making and things of those lines in college. So I actually did a whole journey of things. Nothing planned. There wasn't anything that was planned. It was basically like, hey, wherever I liked and wherever I was curious to learn about things, I just like sort of gravitated. I was also sort of like the placement coordinator in college, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, which is essentially you're the person who's going to invite companies and making sure
Right.
that you can order companies by whatever hotness or things on those lines,
Sure.
from what your students expect. So
Right.
yeah, it was a great exposure. Like I think I had like some of my best moments in college for sure.
So yeah, placement coordinators still very much exist.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean they do. I mean, primarily responsible for the very same things that you're talking about even today. Nothing much has
Yeah.
changed there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was doing some research while preparing for this conversation, and I've heard that if you were not going to be doing HackerRank, you'd probably be a film director.
Oh, did I say that somewhere else?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Okay. Yeah, probably. That is true. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has its roots in your exposure at NIT as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I still want to. I still probably someday. I mean, it's very, very hard to take like a movie and stuff when you're here in the Bay Area. It would have
Right.
been easy if you're back in India. I still
Mhm.
want to. Someday, I'm reasonably sure I will direct a
All right.
movie.
Someday, someday. So let's talk about, see, post college. You worked at Amazon for some time.
Yeah, so I got a job at Amazon through the and maybe like a lot of the things are very subconscious. Like since I was a placement coordinator, I looked after every single company who came into the campus, their interview process, tried to coordinate and all of those things. And Hari got into IBM, and it was really interesting. And I think Hari would be totally fine if I actually said this. Hari's GPA wasn't too high, just so you know. I mean,
Right.
like it's probably a good. It's probably like a stereotypical hacker kind of a thing, which is like, hey, your GPA is not high. Your GPA is very, very high on certain subjects where you really, really love, and it's really bad in like a bunch of other things which you don't
Right.
really like. And then you have like a lot of T-shirts that you've accumulated because you participated in the coding contest. It's probably like the best stereotypical developer. Who, by the way, every company should just like work towards making sure that you can actually hire this guy. But
Right.
we used to have these like maybe it still exists right now, like I actually think it's pretty stupid or dumb criteria on like, hey, you need to have like a GPA greater than 7.5 or like 8 or 7 and things in those lines. Otherwise, like you can't like get you can't
Yeah.
even apply for
You
your
can't even apply. Yeah.
yeah, you can't even apply for a pre-screen. So I actually thought like, man, like just looking at Hari, but again, this was a little bit subconscious. It was not like very obvious that wow, like this guy, every company should get this guy, should hire this guy. He's one of the strongest developers. He's the best hacker that I actually know. I still think he's the best hacker that I know right now.
Mhm.
And why aren't people doing it? But of course, like you just brush past that. Like nobody gave you. And by the way, this was 2009 when I think maybe Flipkart was getting started. Flipkart, I think, is like the flagship of Indian
Yeah.
startup ecosystem, so to speak. I mean, people can
Sure.
argue different ways. So you didn't even have a confidence that, hey, you can go ahead and start a company, you can actually do this and change whatever you want to do and stuff. So you just like brushed past that and said, okay, it's what it is. It is a system. And so once I got into Amazon, I used to do a lot of technical interviews, and I found that, hey, we were actually spending an enormous amount of time doing interviews when our primary job was, of course, to go ahead and write code. And interviews are important. Obviously, you need the team members, you need to hire great people and things. But as a developer, you know this. Like the interviews is also like an exception in your calendar, right? Like it's
Right.
just like it's like somebody just threw an exception like right in the middle of the calendar, right in the middle of the day, 2 hours of interviews, which sort of like breaks your pattern. Hey,
Yeah.
okay, I can't do much in the morning. I can do something in the evening because I have this big chunk of it. So it also,
Non-maskable.
yeah, it also breaks your flow in terms of how you think, how you code, what you want to work on. And then like I also realized like, hey, resumes were the core component of how people were actually using it to screen. Again, very, very similar parameters like your GPA, the school you went to, the courses that you took, and things. And truth be told, it was also hard for a recruiter at Amazon to screen at that point in time because Amazon was as hot as it is right now. You used to get like hundreds of resumes. So what could a recruiter really do?
Right.
Those are all probably a little bit of like subconscious things that sort of led us to, hey, let's actually try to do. And there's nothing really for us to lose. When we weren't married, we were just like out of college. There's really nothing for us to lose. So let's go ahead and start. This was very, very nascent ecosystem back then. We started 2011. We were
Right.
just getting started on there.
And at that time, it wasn't called HackerRank.
Yeah, it actually was called Interview Street. That's how we
Yeah.
got started. So we yeah, HackerRank came in like 2012, 2013. So it's been about like seven-ish years.
Yeah.
For the first couple of years, we did something called Interview Street, which was different from HackerRank. And but the core idea was same, which is to create like a fair, unbiased hiring process. But the product Interview Street worked differently, which is, hey, let's say you had an interview call with Google next week.
Mhm.
You would come onto our site and attend a mock interview with
Mhm.
an ex-Googler to to get an understanding as to where you stood and what can you do to get better at your interview. So you can almost think of this as like a preparation for interview. So you used to pay 350 rupees for an interview as a candidate, and the interviewer would get 250 rupees, and 100 rupees will go to our pocket. I still have that Excel. It's a very embarrassing Excel where, I mean, the beauty of Excel is like you just put in formulas and you drag the cells and you just get like a great number.
Right.
And I think we're projected to make like, I don't know, like a crore or 2 crores or something like that, like close to $500,000 equivalent right now.
Right.
We ended up making 4,000 rupees in the first 18 months. So it was a massive, massive miss. And by the way, you should think about it. This was again like 2010, 11 when you didn't have the razor pays of the world. So payment collection was a pain. There used to be this company called CC Avenue. Maybe they're still around.
Still there,
Like I
yeah.
had to I had to print out documents and prove that we're not like a pawn site or something on those lines to actually go ahead and like get an approval, even to get like a payment. By the way, we just gave up on that. We decided, you know what, students anyway don't have credit cards. Let's actually not even try to do this. So let's actually appoint campus ambassadors in different colleges so that they can go ahead and collect, and then they would give us in cash. I don't know, all these accounting troubles and stuff like that. But anyway, we ended up only getting 4,000 rupees, so it was not like a big deal on that. But the core was like the idea did not work. We didn't have like a good product market fit. It was pretty evident after we tried, which is when we actually shifted. Hey, let's actually try to solve the problem from a company's angle, which is what tools or solutions that we can actually give to companies who can where we can enable them to hire developers based on their skill over pedigree. And that has since formed a core part of our ethos of the company in terms of the product that we build or the hire that we make. That still becomes the core ethos. So that's the idea start of HackerRank, and then we just continue to build products, solutions, value to customers.
Right. How much of that initial product and direction that you took was, let's get the Haris of the world hired, discovered and hired?
Yeah, I think it was a lot. It was a lot. Actually, I would say the one caveat was like Hari was privileged in the sense of NIT Trichy is a decent or a pretty good institution. I don't want to say
Sure.
decent,
Yeah.
lest some people are actually watching it from that college. It's actually a pretty good institution. So I mean, to some degree, Hari was privileged to, or Hari and I were privileged to actually get into that college. But I think the idea was, but every company just goes to 15, 20 campuses, and by the way, it's actually, the problem is way worse and way harder in India than America, because like you have like 3,000 engineering colleges as opposed to like 400 here. So there's like it's almost like a 10x big problem. So I think if you were to categorize the Haris of the world as like just equalizing the playing field, regardless of which school did you go to and what GPA you had, yes, that was the core. We wanted people to get prepared for their jobs, which they did not have an opportunity. But then as we were doing this, we also started to realize there were a bunch of people from different colleges who said, hey, thank you for providing the service where I interviewed with this guy from Amazon or whatever, but Amazon doesn't come to my campus or Google doesn't come to my campus. So
Right.
what is the point? Those were also a little bit subconscious for us. Like, hey, this is not working. We're only making like 4,000 in like 18 months. And your mom starts asking like, hey, when are you going to get a real job and things of those lines. So this was like a more of a subconscious thing, which also led us to like, hey, how do we make sure that we can create opportunities for people to do that?
Right. The next steps are actually pretty exciting. You became one of the first companies from India to get into YC, which is a very
Yeah.
reputed startup incubator based in Mountain View at the time, right?
Yeah.
And today you have 7 million developers on your platform, and you service more than 2,000 companies and helping them with their talent discovery and hiring process. Do you want to like briefly touch upon the beginnings with YC and what motivated you to apply, and then how that journey went on after that, and you kind of skyrocketed into becoming this hacker rank? Yeah.
Yeah. YC happened late 2011, early 2012. Again, I think the Indian startup ecosystem was starting to take off, so to speak. You had the Tiger Globals of the world, like come in, Ola, Flipkart, and all of those companies started to really take off quite a bit at that time. I mean, everybody knew, or like most people who were in the startup ecosystem knew like Y Combinator PG. I used to tell PG, like, you'll be treated like a rock star if you come to Bangalore. Like that's the image that people actually have of you and your essays and things on those lines.
Right.
This was after he confirmed that I got into YC. I didn't want to be like a fanboy during the interview.
Sure.
But everybody sort of like knew like Y Combinator, Paul Graham. And of course, the startups that they have funded had already become pretty big, like Dropbox, Airbnb, and others. Um, I think what prompted us, we actually applied to YC thrice. We got turned down the first couple of times with the Interview Street idea, and then finally we got a chance to apply it for the third time, and we got a call there. I mean, I really. I really wanted to get into Y Combinator. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Like, I really, everybody knew it was a prestigious program. I really wanted us to be a part of it, and was very thrilled, elated to actually even get the interview call. That was our first trip to the US. So we had to go ahead and like figure out how to get our visas and like fly there directly, and it was an amazing experience. YC, I think it was changed our lives, completely changed our lives. It's one of those I don't know, black swan kind of events in a good way that had a complete change in our trajectory, because all of a sudden you just like got exposed to a whole new world in terms of investors, in terms of people, in terms of the way that you can actually go ahead and build companies. It was absolutely a life-changing event for both of us, for me and Hari. And at the time we were like 5 people with a couple of interns or something like that maybe. And we raised money, and we that journey was pretty amazing.
All right, pretty cool. I'll go ahead and talk about a few things around HackerRank's products and the kind of problems it's actually solving, right? We'll talk about how assessment is evolving. Coding assessments or selection criteria and things like that. We have companies that are using approaches that are kind of ranging from coding challenges to projects and things like that, right? There's always a debate on campus, like, why do I have to learn all these complicated data structures and algorithms and practice like 500 problems? What is your take on that? How do you feel about the way assessment is currently done, and your thoughts about the preparation involved and the way they are actually conducted?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that this is like a constant debate for sure. I think maybe I have like a few thoughts. One is, I don't think there is, and this is no particular order. I don't think there is like a one size fits all kind of an assessment. I think it depends upon the type of company, the problems that you're trying to solve. Because if you're being hired to work at Google search, you do need to know all of those optimizations. You do need to know like super esoteric data structures and things on those lines to actually go ahead and work on it. If you're being hired to work at the kernel team in VMware, you better know like super strong C++ and C knowledge to actually go ahead and do it. But if you're like hired to actually go ahead and build a web app, maybe not. So I don't think there's, firstly at a high level, there's no one size fits all assessment procedure to actually go ahead and do it. It depends. I wouldn't even say it depends on the company. It depends upon the team and like what you're trying to hire in that. That said, there is a common denominator. There is a common denominator of what I strongly believe is like fundamental computer science knowledge that everybody needs to have. And this does not mean that you need to know how does a red black tree work, because I would categorize that as a little bit of an esoteric data structure. This does mean that like you need to understand like absolutely the basics of memory management, heaps, arrays, like all like basic sorting and other parts of it. Even though you might actually not literally hard code like a merge sort or like a sorting in your day-to-day life, there's probably definitely a library in every language that can actually do that. But you need to understand the core fundamentals of how things actually work. And I'm a very, very strong believer in that. And like so the way that we think about designing assessments is, hey, don't have like a crazy math problem or like some sort of a trick where only if you know the trick you would be able to actually go ahead and answer this question and things on those lines. Have simple data structure algorithm problems where like people should be able to understand the question easily and then start to code. And I think that the knowledge that you're testing is probably two parts. One is your computational thinking. Can you break a
Right.
problem into sub problems? And second is, okay, once you know that, can you convert your idea into code? So I feel pretty strongly about like having a base level understanding across all of these things. So regardless of your seniority and regardless of whether you're actually going to use like a array, I'm pretty sure you'd use an array, regardless of whether you actually use like other these things in your day-to-day programming. And the last thing I would say is, I don't know if this is a perfect analogy, but you know, when people prepare for your games in sports, whether it's a cricket or football and things of those lines, people spend a pretty heavy portion of their time actually exercising, like stretching their muscles and like running and jogging and like, you know, doing all of those things apart from like actually practicing batting on the nets, for example, or bowling and things on those lines. Which, by the way, you can argue is like that's what you actually do on the game. So why not just like do that? Like, why are you going ahead and doing exercise? Why are you actually
Right.
stretching your muscles? Why are you doing all of these things? I mean, those are like sort of like fundamentals, right? Like, sure, your actions in the game might mostly be how you bowl, like how you bat, like how you catch a ball and things on those lines. But
Right.
unless and otherwise your core muscles are developed, I don't think you'll be able to perform at the level that you want to. So to some degree, like computer science fundamentals are that. Like technology always keeps changing, like things always keeps evolving, but the core of it still remains the same. And I would expect everybody to have a very strong understanding of that.
Yeah, I think the cricket analogy fits perfectly well, and you can see the current Indian cricket team and compare
Exactly.
it with what it used to be like 30 years ago, and you can
Yeah.
see the change and what fitness has actually done to the level of playing as well, which I
Yeah.
think is spot on.
It's completely changed the bar, right? Like
Yeah,
if you're not, you can't even enter the cricket team right now if you're not fit
right.
by a huge margin relative to like whatever you're saying, the 90s cricket team, which is what, like, you know,
Yeah.
maybe you and I grew up in. Yeah.
So, you are also kind of evolving into a platform that caters to a wide variety of assessments. It's not just coding data structures, algorithms. You also are evolving into a platform, and we probably already have a lot of customers doing project-based hiring, or if a certain company wants to test you on your, say, React app building, then you do offer those services as well. How are these things changing? How is the adoption for such products within companies? Is it taking off, or is it still some esoteric companies that are willing to bet on these things right now?
You know, it's taken off very strong. It's starting to become like a default, mostly used in combination with your a simple algorithmic challenge. Yeah, I would no longer classify this as esoteric or just a subset or a niche by any means. It's starting to become like, excuse me, it's starting to become like the norm. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's good to know. And with HackerRank, it's like a two-sided marketplace. Like with data structures, algorithms, a lot of opportunities for students to prepare and practice. And then, of course, there are these new problems that your team keeps coming up with, and there's always something new to look forward to in the actual assessment. Do you have a corresponding sort of opportunity for learning, etc., in this different and new evolving domain of assessment?
Yeah. I think I mean it's probably what very similar to what you folks do at Crio,
Right.
in terms of how do you make sure that you can have project-based learning, which is I mean essentially something like the flight simulator, right? Make sure that you are learning very close to what you'd actually do in your job. I think that's pretty powerful. Yeah, I mean we're always constantly thinking about. I think the way we think about the HackerRank community is definitely, hey, how do we help a developer prepare and apply for a job based on their skills? I mean that's the sort of like the core driving principle of the developer community, and we're constantly thinking through that. And yeah, so I think part of it is also the real world projects and things on those lines is definitely part of our roadmap.
All right. Um, that's a good segue into my next question, which is the developer skill report that HackerRank also offers, right? Tell us more about that. What is the developer skill report?
Yeah, so we do this as a tradition every year where we survey our developer community as well as like other developers that we could actually get in terms of like, hey, and we ask them a wide range of questions from just like a simple like when did you first learn to code and what was your first project that you actually did, all the way up to sort of how do you think about remote first work in the future, what how do you think about like upskilling yourself within the organization, what are some of the things that your company does and what can we do. So I think the idea here is to sort of try to put the minds of hundreds of thousands of developers and like try to get like, insights that can actually benefit a lot of companies and developers outside in terms of like a wide variety of topics on that. So we've done that thrice in a row, and sometime this year we'll also do it the fourth time. Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's awesome. So, based on your assessment so far and survey of where the skills are and where the demand is, which are the skills that are evolving and emerging into these highly like in demand skills that you see coming up right now?
I think, I think it keeps evolving, it keeps changing. Just broadly, like data science and machine learning is definitely a huge part of it, huge component of it from just like a role perspective. If you just take like the pure back end, Go is now starting to become like a very popular language. A lot of backend services and everything is starting to be migrated to Go. That's also something that is catching developers' attention. Frontend is always evolving. There seems to be almost like a new framework that of JavaScript that gets launched every 6 months or maybe even faster
Yeah.
than that. So there are so many interesting things that are happening in the front end space of it. No, I think you're starting to see a lot on data science, machine learning, Go, and front end on React and other frameworks that are coming up. It's coming along. I mean, these are all like pretty exciting things to look out for.
Right. What are your views on, the tech ecosystems that are kind of emerging in India? Um, Even back when you started, I think still pretty nascent, but today, what is your read on India's tech scene and how it's shaping up?
I think it's I mean it's a dramatic shift in the last yeah, like I mentioned, we started in 2011, right? Like so it's probably a decade. It's a huge shift. I think um one I think the startup ecosystem has definitely contributed a lot to the tech ecosystem quite a bit, and there's also a lot of cross pollination that has actually happened. Like I've seen like people, distinguished engineering leaders in the Bay Area and others who have actually migrated or moved to India and are now like leading like really strong engineering teams. That has happened quite a bit.
Right.
By the way, that is because of the startup pull really to do it. So I think the startup ecosystem has definitely influenced. And then like we should also think about like how the sort of the large corporations have also doubled down and invested tremendously in India. So every time we sign up a customer here, it's almost inevitable that they have like a huge engineering presence in Bangalore, whether that's Adobe or JP Morgan Chase or Amazon or like, pick any company, Goldman Sachs, like, they have like a huge presence in India, and they view that as a very strategic location. India used to be, and this is like, maybe when I was in school and others, like India used to be known for like, oh, quote unquote outsourced engineers, oh, like,
Right.
it's just like an offshore kind of a thing. No, but this time it's a real R&D presence. People view engineering in India as a very strategic part of their business. So the rise in the startup ecosystem coupled with like the investments from large companies, I think has completely changed the game. The salaries are continuing to rise.
Right.
At a very dramatic pace. It's pretty. I don't know whether that's healthy or not. I don't know if people in HackRank are watching this, so don't worry, folks. Like you're all like well paid, and like I definitely want to take care of all of you. But it is something. It is really something that we need to think through, which is the average tenure, for example, in Bangalore, in cities like Bangalore and things for a developer is, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years.
think it's about 2 to 3. Yeah,
Yeah, it's three, even three is probably like stretching a bit. I
pushing
don't
it.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not healthy. I mean, like you start to like really know the company. You start to have like real strong, meaningful contributions in terms to the business of the company, not just like shipping features and things like that. Like actually moving the needle, starting at like sort of like the 2 year mark, 3 year mark, and things of those lines, and your investment starts to compound. So, but if you keep switching jobs or hopping jobs every 2 years, you just like lose that compounding power completely, and it's very very hard to get that back. So I do think there are parts of the system, and I actually don't know how to actually change or like make this better and things of those lines, because it's not like the Bay Area has like a long tenure either. Like it's still the same challenges that we face,
Yeah.
but there is some version of like, hey, how do you make sure that people can stay longer
Hmm.
in your company? What can the companies do to make sure that, and usually the reason is like, hey, the growth, I need like growth, or I need like a different challenge and things on those lines. Sometimes it's, hey, I have this new shiny object that this company is trying to offer, which by the way suddenly starts to become old after 6 months into the job, like, oh, I
Yeah.
need to chase another new shiny object. So there's a little bit about of that we need to think through. That coupled with like, hey, what's like a good healthy way that you can actually give salaries and options and things of those lines is needed. I still feel like people discount your stock value, and it's still like mostly a cash based ecosystem that you need to. Hey, if I move from one company to another, I get like a 30% hike kind of a
Right.
thing. So uh, I think those are the things that I view as like things that could potentially just like harm the ecosystem in the long run, because
Hmm.
we're starting to build some amazing things coming out of India. We're solving really hard problems, which is robotics. Like nobody thought like you'll have like kind of like robot. I mean, we have so many robotics companies as our customers from India. So those are my views. It's definitely evolved, but there are like challenges to be solved.
One follow up on that, right? When you touched upon compensation and things like that, is it more because it is affordable when you compare it with rates in other countries, or is it a function of the paucity of skill, and hiring skilled developers is very very tough, and you have to pay competitive wages in order to attract them? How much of it is one versus the other in India,
I
I
think
mean?
I think I I think the notion that there used to be a notion that okay, so it's a good balance of cost and skill
Hmm.
to actually set up like an engineering team and things of those in India. I think you have unbelievable skill in terms of developers and things in India. It's continuing to grow. I don't think that I don't, if you're thinking of this as a trade-off of cost and skill, I don't think that exists anymore, like in terms
Right.
of relative to like other regions, for example, that you can actually go ahead and hire in terms of the trade-off. If you're thinking of it as a pure skill,
Hmm.
100%, like it's just like very very strong on that. To your question of why is the cost of developer hiring continuing to go, and salaries and things of those lines, I think at some degree it's free market. So I think the market determines like the value,
Hmm.
and so for what I mean, just to be clear, I think developers deserve this kind of like value and things of those lines. I think it's a free market, and like so it will continue to do. But I've seen this for the last like whatever, like 7 years or so, and the amount of compounded growth that it's happening every year, someday this is one of those frothy valuation bubbles kind of a thing. Someday it will, I feel like it's just going to like hit a ceiling, or like something terrible happens, and that's not good because we've nurtured and built it pretty well.
Okay, all right. So, what should Indian developers do then to compete with jobs and talent on a global stage, and build great products not only for India but for the world? As Your thoughts on that?
I think, firstly, I think if you're a developer, I would consider as a very privileged, lucky role relative to all the other roles. Like if you just think of even like 2020, which was a horrible year for most companies in terms of like layoffs and others, candidly, like R&D was the least affected relative to every other department: sales, marketing, customer success. Like, you pick any other department, like engineering and product, like, or sort of in the tech, was the least impacted. And in fact, like, there were companies that were accelerating their hiring of developers during this pandemic because their usage of services of their products started to go up. Twilio, Atlassian, ServiceNow, and all of these companies were hiring more developers during the pandemic than their prior plan. So I think just at a very, very high level, like, everyone, if you're a developer, you've made like an amazing choice, which is going to stay for a long, long time. Like, I don't ever see this like going away. I mean, we had like 20-ish million developers in the world 18 months back, and I go by GitHub as a bit of an authority in the space. Today, GitHub has 50 million, 18 months, more than doubled or close to double. That's an amazing rate. That's an unbelievable rate. And will it double again in 18 months? I don't know if this rate is going to be sustainable, but
Sure.
but if you just look at the white space, there are a billion white collar professionals and only 50 million are developers, and the rate has doubled. I mean, like, look at the white space. That's huge. So I think there is an enormous amount of opportunity for developers, and it's going to continue to grow. This tailwind will I don't see it stopping at all, because again, like every company, from the famous Mark Andreessen quote of every company is fundamentally becoming a software company regardless of whichever industry you are in. So that's an amazing choice. Second part of the question: how do you compete? How do you stand out? And how do you do it? I don't think there is any fixed kind of method or formula and things of those lines. I think it comes down to sort of there are so many. There are so many components in like sort of like building an application, which is very hard for an end user to actually absorb. Like, you're talking, you and I are talking in Zoom. Like, I see the audio cancellation. That's one part of it. Like, encryption, audio encryption is one part of it. The video is streaming without any kind of loss. There's probably a bunch of site reliability engineers and DevOps working like days and nights to make sure that this actually is always up and running. Like, there are just so many, and of course there's like the UI. There's an application that you need to build in Mac and Windows and things. You need to have like cross domain portability. There are just like so many components in like building an app that I think as a developer, if you are attracted to something, make sure that you can actually hone your skills to become an expert. That's probably the best way, which is to what is naturally attracting to you. There are so many components, and how can you become an expert where you get like more inbound demand as opposed to you going ahead and searching. And it's okay to do that sort of exploration, at least when you're in college, and maybe a bunch of developers audience are in college, like to do okay, maybe in a developer way, you should probably do a breadth first search, which is like try to explore like as many things as possible and like see which one gets attracted and then go deep in it. I think those are probably the two things. You're lucky, do a BFS, figure out which component actually really attracts, and go as deep as possible.
All right, I love the algorithm metaphor there. So that's awesome. So last question for you before we go to audience questions, right? And we'll take a few audience questions. For the developers who are still in college, dreaming, looking at HackerRank, looking at Vivek, and looking at all these amazing startups emerging around them, working, sort of earlier on in their careers as well. What would your advice be to them?
I think college is by far the best place for you to explore and experiment. You will never get that level of freedom post college. Most of them will actually become in a bit of a treadmill. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but like it's just the way of life. Once you get a job, like you're going to be focused on how do you get promoted, and like how do you get more responsibilities, how do you make more money. Once you have a family, obviously you need to like take care of your family and kids and things on those lines that come into play. They're always going to be like your life will always have like more constraints as you go. And college is like probably the best place for you to try and explore. It's probably similar advice, like whatever I just said on the BFS versus DFS, which is like, hey, explore as many things as possible and see what actually attracts you, and not just in computer science or technology, right? Like I just talked about movie making, for example, and I think you should play an instrument, like whatever actually is, whatever, try out as many things and see which one you actually like, and then like go deep in it. The second part of it, I would say, is I think people underestimate how quickly humans can learn a particular skill. It's people completely underestimate it. Like, you want to learn an instrument, like you can actually, if you put your mind and heart to it, you can actually go ahead and learn. And I think so don't sell yourself short that, oh, I didn't learn this early on and things in those lines. Don't sell yourself short. Just like make sure that once you like something, you can actually put your heart and soul into it and continue to do it. That's the best use in my view on your college life. You will never get those 4 years of exploration back.
Any piece of advice for working professionals early in their career, say 1 to 3 years, looking to get into software, looking into upskill and sort of get in on this amazing bandwagon?
I think I hesitate to give like a standard advice on working professionals, because there are so many
Yeah.
variants. You can also say the same thing for college, but like I feel like they're more homogeneous than working professionals. So if there is one thing I would say is, I think again, like similar to the advice on the college professionals, like I feel like you should optimize for high risk, high reward when you're early in your career as a working professional, which means take chance on a startup that you really are passionate about. Maybe not even as a founder, maybe you're the fifth employee, maybe you're the sixth employee, or whatever it is, but like take a shot at something that you are personally passionate about. And there are a lot of people in HackerRank who have actually done really, really amazing things, who've gone out to start in other companies and things of those lines, because they took a shot on me and Hari candidly, and the idea and the mission statement to make this big. And they continue to work on it. So optimize for high risk, high reward, because again, like, the high risk can be like a giant upside that can have a trajectory changing impact on your life. And yeah.
All right, good stuff. We're way over time, but just a few questions from the audience that we've already shared a link where they've asked these questions. So I'll just pick a few of them. So what are your views on the future of software development? Will technologies like ML, AI overpower the core software engineering field?
I think it is part of the software engineering field. I don't know how this person meant as overpower. I think it's going to be part of, if this person is asking like, will machine learning thing automatically start to write code on its own? I would say I understand a lot of machine learning, what's the progress and things on those lines, but I would by no means I'm an expert. So I don't know what is possible, what is not possible, on those angles. Although we're making like amazing progress on that, we're using machine learning a lot internally to also understand code and see like what skills you have based on the code that you write. So I don't know if it's overpowering, but it's certainly a huge trend, very, very critical trend.
Right. One problem-solving book that you would recommend to all developers?
I would say like HackerRank. You should probably like check out HackerRank. From a book perspective, I used to love the CLRS book when I was in college.
Right.
But I haven't opened that at all. But I think right now, I don't know, like, do people still do like books and things? I actually have this as well. This is a cool book. This is actually written by Steven Skinner, the Algorithm Design Manual. It's actually the third edition that has actually come out.
Okay.
He's a great professor, and and the cool thing about this, and I know this is a bit of an advertisement, all the exercise problems in this book have a HackerRank link to it. So once you study this, like, you also can go ahead and solve in HackerRank
Nice.
to practice the same concepts as well.
That's pretty convenient. Good stuff there, right? There's one more quick one, and then we'll finish with the final one. Okay, so the change in hiring landscape and the assessments we talked about, not just data structures algorithms, but also project-based hiring. Do you see that transition also in companies that are based in India, and Indian companies using HackerRank for their hiring? Are they also kind of adopting this new kind of direction of assessments
Yeah, it's global. It's across the board. Yeah,
across the board?
and yeah.
I guess it was just a matter of making it possible, and suddenly everybody wants it, right?
Yeah, agree.
All right, cool. So, last question, right? What are the necessary things required to start a startup? Things that they can't ignore.
I think the hardest and by far the biggest thing is your courage and will. The rest of them you can actually go ahead and figure out how to raise money and things of those lines. Of course, you got to figure out a way how to get to product market fit, which also, by the way, is a big portion of courage and will. But by far, those two are like the hardest things. Not just for starting a company, even as you continue to do it. Like, do you have the courage to make a decision, sort of an unpopular decision, so to speak? Do you have the will to continue to pursue despite, like, huge setbacks? Even today, I would think of those two factors as probably the hardest, because once you have those two things pretty strong, I think you can probably wield the world in the way that you want.
Amazing. Vivek, thank you so much. It was really great getting to know you more and asking all these questions, and you've shared some incredible insights as well with our audience. Any final message to the audience that's listening to you live right now on YouTube?
Yeah, I think it's an amazing time to be a developer. Like I mentioned, it's not going to go away. It's in fact only going to get more and more prominent and interesting over time. It's an amazing time, and just ship great things, ship great products. Like figure out what you're passionate about, and continue to become an expert there.
All right. With that, thank you so much, Vivek. It was really nice to have you, and thank you for sparing us your time here and coming here and sharing your thoughts.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ajay. Thank
All
you,
right.
Crio.
All right. Thank you. To all the audience here, still waiting, thank you for joining us. This is the second live session we've had with a fireside chat with Vivek from HackerRank. We have more online if you are a part of Cryo's Winter of Doing event. So stay tuned, participate, and get access to even more experts from India, from across the world, coming and sharing their ideas with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today and spending your time with me and Vivek. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.